Welcome to the Midstream News Podcast. I'm Kevin Broom, and I'm here today with Tyler Menzler, who we have just added to our federal affairs advocacy team. So, Tyler, welcome to the Midstream News Podcast.
Thanks, Kevin. Really appreciate it.
So, you've been with GPA Midstream like 2 weeks now, and what surprised you? What's impressed you about the midstream industry so far?
Yeah, so I think the biggest surprise has just been how interconnected everything is. So before coming here, working on energy policy on Capitol Hill, I certainly understood pipelines and processing at a higher level. But now seeing the much more technical expertise that goes into the gathering, the processing, the storage, the transportation to deliver the products that Americans rely on each day. So I've been struck by how invisible the industry is. When the midstream is doing its job well, people don't really think about it, right? But virtually every part of our economy depends on it, and it's really made it fascinating to learn.
Yeah, I had a similar reaction when I started in midstream. I was really impressed with how, like you say, the technical expertise, but just also how much goes into it, how much effort, how much work, how much capital, just how, and then how many interconnected and interwoven parts there are to delivering energy from getting the molecule out of the ground and then turning it into something that we can use to generate economic activity or to live a more comfortable life, that kind of stuff. It just amazed me how much goes into it.
Yeah, for sure. And the amount of products that are touched by the products that we move in the midstream industry is just fascinating to just kind of put on a spectrum and look at altogether.
The purpose of this episode is to introduce you to our members and to let them have a sense for who you are. And so that also, when you are at convention in San Antonio this September, when people see you walking by, they'll know who you are and they'll grab you and start telling you, look, this is what's important to us, that kind of stuff. But before we get to the September, let's go back to sort of the beginning for you. And I'm not talking about like your birth date and location and all that kind of stuff, but what sparked your interest in politics and in public policy? Was there a particular moment you realized I want to get involved in, making policy and in government? And so, what was that moment for you?
Yeah, and I remember this moment very vividly. It's something I talk about a lot. So I grew up in Denora, Pennsylvania, a small steel town south of Pittsburgh. And I remember one evening on a Friday, Saturday night, my dad would always let me watch like a PG-13 R-rated movie that he felt was appropriate as I was growing up. And we ended up watching one evening Oliver Stone's JFK. Uh, and prior to that, I really wasn't into the Washington D.C. stuff. I was playing football. I was worried about what every other little 8-year-old was worried about at the time, 9-year-old, whatever, somewhere in that time period. But we watched JFK, Oliver Stone's JFK, and at the end of the movie, I was just so enthralled with that whole situation, Washington D.C. politics, and I told my dad, "I'm going to find out who killed that man." And that was kind of that moment where I just took off in politics, and every paper I was writing in high school had some kind of political bend to it. I got involved in the Bush Gore debate in high school, debating for one side. I'll let you guess which side that was. But no, that moment for me really solidified kind of what my career was going to look like because I was just I was so interested in it.
So, I have to ask, who killed JFK?
Well, I mean, if you read all these documents that the Trump administration just declassified, it really doesn't give us an answer, right? I mean, if it were up to me, I have my choice, but I will not disclose that for security reasons.
All right, fair enough. So, your interest, you turned that into a career. You've spent years working on Capitol Hill. So, for people who haven't worked in Washington, what does a typical day look like for a congressional staffer?
I think that first of all, that could be a very long answer. I think the short answer is simply controlled chaos. So, as the chief of staff, every day you wake up, you get to the office early, you start with a plan, and by 9 a.m., that plan is out the window. So you're juggling constituent concerns that have kind of raised to your level, trying to make sure that what's getting to the member of Congress is appropriate, what's not. Uh, on top of that, you have the members' schedule, so the committee hearings, legislation that's being considered that day, your meetings with stakeholders that come in. then votes on the floor and whatever unexpected issue pops up, whether it's a news media hit, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the biggest jobs in a typical day is just translating some of that complicated policy into information that your member can use to make their decisions quickly. I tell everybody a minute in politics really feels like a lifetime some days.
Yeah, yeah, I understand that, and that's something that has impressed me when I've met with congressional staffers, gone up on the Hill and had meetings where a lot of times you get, especially the more senior people on the staffs, their level of knowledge is astounding. Their breadth of the range of issues that they cover is really, really, really impressive, and how they can connect so many different threads into the policies, into the legislative vehicles that are being worked on up there. It really is impressive.
Sometimes you kind of feel like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, being able to kind of make those connections between a lot of those topics and figuring out how to best serve that constituency. That's really the fun part though.
I had mentioned senior staffers. You were one. You were chief of staff for Mariannette Miller-Meeks, representative from Iowa. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, Southeast Iowa.
What's like an experience you had as chief of staff there that shaped how you think about policymaking that you'll be bringing into the GPA midstream role?
I'm not going to dial it down to just one particular thing, but I think an experience at all that taught me how to shape policymaking is good policy always comes from listening before talking. And Marinette was very good at meeting with everybody that asked for a meeting in her office. She is a surgeon by trade, and she very much so wants to understand the issue from every angle before she makes her decisions, and very deliberate in that process. And you know, I think it's something that this city really forgets to do sometimes, between news hits, reporters constantly being in front of members of Congress. A lot of people kind of enjoy speaking before listening, before figuring out what that next step is. And that's one thing that I learned can shape good policy, is from just listening from every angle, and then kind of creating that roadmap, and kind of just formalizing what that final step looks like.
One of the things that heard a lot of times from people who used to work on the Hill or who were working on the Hill at the time are the interesting and fun sort of behind the scenes stories of the characters up on the Hill. And as an example, I used to work for a couple of women who each were chief of staff at various points to speakers of the House. And one of the speakers, who I will not name at this point, her rule as chief of staff was that they would do nothing that he asked unless he asked three times, because he would throw out all of these ideas, all of these questions, and then they would come back to him the next day with the answer to his question, something which took, extensive research and a lot of work, and he would have no idea what they were talking about because it was just an idea that he had and he wasn't really all that serious about it. So I'm just wondering, like, what kind of story do you have? You don't have to name names, but just what kind of stories do you have about people up on the Hill, just the sort of characters that are up there?
Yeah, so lots of stories, some of them for public edification, most of them aren't. But I will share one story, and I'm going to name the member. I really learned to come to respect him. Unfortunately, we lost him a few years ago. And this is prior to my time being a chief of staff on the Hill, but I had been on the Hill prior to this. I left the Hill to go to the Cigar Association to be their director of legislative affairs. And I got to know Don Young pretty well in that position. And Don was just a massive personality, just a massive person altogether on Capitol Hill. And one of the things I'll never forget is he enjoyed his cigars, as most members who kind of participate in the Cigar Association's events. And there were times where Don, God bless him, would always come late, and he would want a cigar, and we may even run out of cigars. And he took a cigar out of my pocket, clipped both ends as if I'd smoked it, but I hadn't, and then put it in his pocket, said, "I'm going to save that one for later." And I said, "Absolutely, sir. If that's what you want to do, you're more than welcome to that cigar." But it's just, I love these kind of stories because it reminds me that we see them as members of Congress. Sometimes we celebritize them because they're on TV or, they're out and about in their districts. But at the end of the day, I come to learn that they're just people, and they're just people just like you and I, everyday lives. They have their ups and downs as well. And a lot of times they kind of look for that connection from others because I will say, I'm sure some of them just get tired of kind of the stigma around a member of Congress. So Don, really miss him. He was a especially on the T&I committee, massive member. But that was one of the funniest things I could think of quickly for you uh,
Yeah.
when you asked that question.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right, turning a little more serious now. You were on the Hill for a number of years. So, what's like a piece of legislation, a bill, a policy that you're particularly proud of that you worked on?
Yeah, so I always take this one back to my first major piece of legislation. So I was working on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee for Chairman Schuster, who was out of Central Pennsylvania there, and I worked on the Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management subcommittee. Prior to my career on the Hill, beginning in 2017, when I was still living at home, campaigning, or kind of just going back to my home base in Western Pennsylvania, I was a firefighter for 12 years, and I got the opportunity to work on DURA, the Disaster Response Recovery Act, following the horrific hurricanes that had hit the Texas Gulf Coast there into Louisiana. And we got a lot of provisions in there that I was pretty proud to work on, kind of supporting fire departments, uh, supporting nonprofit associations with FEMA recovery funds, and things like that. So I actually have a copy of the bill that's framed, that was given to me, that hangs at home. I'm going to be filling this wall back here once I'm able to put a nail hole back here with my degrees and my bill. But that's probably one of the most memorable legislative accomplishments that I like to talk about. I mean, on top of that, I've worked with plenty of healthcare bills, energy recycling bills, kind of you name it. As you said or alluded to earlier, you kind of have your hands across a lot of different policy subjects. But Dura for me at the T&I committee in 2018 was just very memorable.
In addition to your work on Capitol Hill, you also worked in the Trump administration, the first go around.
Yeah.
How did working in the executive branch differ from legislative?
Yeah. So I liked it because it gave me the opportunity to see how the other side of the table looks at it. Congress debates ideas and writes the law. The executive branch has to actually execute those laws. And working in both these places kind of helped me appreciate that passing legislation is merely half the job. That's it. And when it comes to lobbying and passing legislation, I mean, some of those have shelf lives of 7 years before we even get things done. And you have the back and forth between the majority, that could happen in the House. So, that time frame is a long lead up. And then you get to the executive branch, and it's up to you to execute and implement those rules and regulations. And that was cool. Another thing for me specifically, I was at the General Services Administration, so they handle a lot of the Federal Acquisition Service and the public buildings commissioners as House and GSA. And one of my priority issues was the Trump Hotel here in Washington, and that was pretty cool for me because I got to see it from the other side of the table on committee at T&I, and then also got to handle it for the administration for that year that I was at GSA. So that was pretty cool.
All right, let's fast forward now a little bit to you exited the administration. You're not on Capitol Hill anymore. You could have gone a lot of different directions. What ultimately made GPA Midstream the right next step for you?
Yeah. So, energy has always been kind of in my DNA makeup. And I'm going back to Denora there in Western Pennsylvania, couple tie-ins to GPA for me. So steel industry. My father was bearings and power transmission, a sales director for Fairmont Supply, which was a subsidiary of Consol Energy, working on Capitol Hill on energy policy. But Denora, PA, is pretty integral for me in this because in 1948, a killer smog had covered our valley, killed over 30 people, I believe, was this national, international kind of weather news event. And we always said clean air started, right? And the Clean Air Act is something that uh, is very much so in the purview of GPA. So when I came out of Capitol Hill, finished my MBA, I kind of wanted to get back into that energy, the energy industry to kind of work directly on these issues. And the midstream for me, again, going back to that first question, you don't really realize until you dig into this stuff how expansive this industry is and what it covers. That to me is important, integral work, and it made a decision easy to kind of come after this job.
Kind of begs the question, what exactly are you going to be doing for GPA Midstream?
Yeah, so I'm very excited to work underneath Stuart. You know, think that he and I complement each other very well. So, manager of federal affairs, my plan is to be all over Washington, D.C., Capitol Hill within this administration, just simply advocating for some of those important policies that all of our members care about. So, you know, everybody feel like permitting reform has been the buzzword for the last 7 to 10 years. But I feel like we're kind of in the right direction. You finally see the House moving some pieces of legislation. We got to get the Senate kind of interested and focused on something at this point. Really been diving into this methane rule that was rescinded under the Trump administration and kind of what that means for members. That's been kind of the hot topic for the last week. And then we have pipeline safety reauth that's marked up today in the Energy and Commerce Full Committee. Surface transportation reauth's making its way through. So there's a lot happening over the next month and a half. We go into August recess, come back for September, and then Congress is out until the election. So we're hoping that we can get some things moving in that time frame.
Yeah, so you've ticked a few of the top issues that are right now. Are there any others that you're going to be paying closer attention to? Any that you think might gain traction, say when we're out of the election year? We will have 2027, I guess.
Yeah. Well, so 2027 is going to be interesting, right? I mean, you're potentially see a change in House, at least House leadership. So I really expect the next Congress to be a lot of AI data center heavy, which again is something that our members are very interested in. They're going to need the energy infrastructure to operate those if they're going to be allowed to operate. That's a hot button issue within communities across the country now. So I really expect that to be a hot button issue for us. Like I said, if leadership changes, we will attempt to put ourselves in the best position to kind of address that change and figure out how GPA can be seen as a resource and respected across Capitol Hill.
What are some ways that GPA Midstream members can work with you and through GPA Midstream to support government advocacy on issues that are important to the industry?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this one's very important, and I really pray that the members will hear this and act on it. First and foremost, when you work for an association, you work for that membership, and that is at the top of the list. So I would love to hear from the members, whether it is a bigger member, small member, what that issue is that they're facing, and I want them to also recognize that it doesn't have to be just an energy issue. We could be helpful on immigration issues. We could be helpful on tax issues, and things like that. It's just one of those things where I'm not going to realize that there is an issue if I'm not hearing about it. And it's my job to dig, and I will find it. But at the end of the day, I love hearing from the membership because it will help me steer my job as I navigate through Congress and take some of those issues and try and figure out how we can get wins for the industry and wins for our member companies.
So you're at convention in San Antonio. People will come up to you and talk to you, especially after sessions, that kind of stuff. It's some of the conversations that I've had there have been among the best, best I've had. So, what kinds of conversations would you like to have with members? What do you hope to hear?
Yeah, honestly, I just want to learn. Tell me about your operation. Tell me what's working. Tell me what's frustrating you. tell me, look, Washington is not a perfect place. Tell me where Washington is getting it right for you and Washington is getting it wrong. Because I think those are the conversations that are going to help me become a better advocate for you. And, having that authentic, kind of off the record conversation is really going to be beneficial in the long run as Stuart and I navigate Capitol Hill, this administration, and then the changes in the future. So, please approach me. Tell me all about it. Tell me till you're blue in the face. I want to hear it. I will take notes. I will listen. I will probably have a boatload of follow up questions. So I just ask that we engage.
Yeah, and I think your point too that you made few seconds ago about hearing the range of issues because we talked at the opening about all of the technical issues and the challenges and just how involved everything is, but on top of all of those, like energy infrastructure, permitting, environmental regulation, safety, all of that, there's also then layered on, as you said, immigration, healthcare, all of those kinds of just business issues, the kinds of issues that arise from any company that operates any business, that all of that also affects midstream as well. And that's all stuff that, to the extent that Congress is working on those or that there are regulations affecting those are important that we know about as well so that we can know if there's work to be done in those areas.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm a big proponent at kind of the all around aspect. I recognize that every decision that this city makes affects every company's top line revenue, every company's workforce, retirement, healthcare benefits, whatever it is, any decision here on any given day is going to affect them. So recognizing that this is so much more than an energy operation is something that I want to hear. And I want people to think of us as a helpful tool that way. I don't want them to feel like they're not being listened to, or if they're not connecting with their member of Congress at home, how can I help make that connection through my relationships and past connections? Being a chief of staff on Capitol Hill, you get to know the members and their chiefs of staff very well in public settings, in the private settings, whether it be on trips, at dinners, in certain meetings, whatever it could be. So I want to be able to be a resource to the membership and let them know that they do have a fighter for them here in Washington.
Looking ahead 5 years, what would success look like for you at GPA Midstream?
Yeah, so first of all, I please forgive me. I've never operated in the 5 year kind of what's 5 years look like because again, I told you a minute in politics always seemed like a lifetime, right? But I think from a GPA standpoint, 5 years from now, success means that our membership knows that they have an advocacy team in Washington who understands both the policymaking process and their business. And we want to help strengthen their relationships on Capitol Hill, not just for our individual benefits, but for the association's benefits at all, that we can advance policies that allow this industry to build the infrastructure and innovate as America progresses over the next 5 years. Because I really think we're at a tipping point with the data center, with where technology is going to go. And that we continue to earn that trust of the members. I will certainly consider that a major win for a career here at GPA if I'm able to achieve that for them.
Anything else you want to add before we wrap up here?
No, I look forward to kind of meeting the membership and continue to work for them, and hopefully we can have some great conversations, and we will take our wins when we get them.
Yeah, yeah. So before we sign off, I just wanted to mention for those who are listening some upcoming GPA midstream events. So currently this week we've got the School of Chromatography. Next week we've got Introduction to Midstream, which is sold out. And then coming up we have the convention, of course. We've got GPSA Engineering Data Book Training coming in October. And we also have another Introduction to Midstream coming in that October, November timeframe. And I believe, Tyler, you're going to be at the intro in October, right?
No, next week I'm going to Denver. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. So we're
So
going
I'll be
to have a
very interested to hear what you learn. I found it to be eye opening and illuminating. It's extremely valuable. I use information I learned there literally every day. So
Yeah. Now, I'll tell you one thing I'm really excited for, Kevin, is, with the experience that I've had on from a Capitol Hill perspective, we've always gotten like C-suite employees and things like that when they come and advocate and lobby for their issues. But I always love digging down into the workforce and talking to the operators and really figuring out, what's working, what's not. And so I'm very excited to interact with that, for lack of better terms, quote unquote clientele next week. And looking at the roster, that seems to be the case, and I'm very excited for it.
well, sounds good. So thank you everyone for listening, and we'll be back soon with another episode of the Midstream News Podcast.